So the presentation is on the role of feedback in online learning, both during the pandemic and during normal instruction. What I want to talk today is about some of the issues. Are faculty, number one, delivering feedback? Most of us are delivering feedback, but we're not sensitive to the different types of feedback that there are. And we need to be sensitive to the types of feedback, constructive feedback, or corrective feedback. There are all kinds of different types of feedback that I'm going to be covering today, and people keep popping up on the screen wanting to be admitted. What I see as some of the big issues, number one, are students reading the feedback that we send to them, and then are they responding? Are they making the changes that we suggest to a paper, to their way of thinking? Because some of your students think maybe somewhat illogically, irrationally, or unreasonably. What we also want to look at is whether or not feedback makes a difference. Does it really improve student learning? Or is it just something that people kind of go through or ignore? So we really need to look at whether students are reading, understanding, comprehending the feedback that they get. So does it make a difference in their learning in the short term or in the long term? Now, the problem is with so many different kinds of feedback, can we really tell what impacts students? What makes one student improve their writing, improve their thinking, improve their logic, their reason, their rationality? What really makes a big impact? Big concern is there any faculty training in giving feedback or in using feedback? Hopefully you will give me some feedback about the presentation and not about the technology problems that we have. That's a whole nother thing. The students aren't very concerned about academic feedback, but they are very frustrated with technology and the problems with technology. Can faculty self-evaluate? We have, let's see, I don't know, about 47, 57. We still have people entering the room. But can faculty really look at what they are doing, or can we use peers? Can faculty look at the feedback of other individuals and give them feedback as to what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong? Big issue, whether or not students like feedback. Do they want to get constructive criticism, or do they see this as highly negative? We have a problem of emotional sensitivity, and that some students, they just want a grade, A, B, C, D, or 90, 70, 80, 60. They don't want the constructive criticism. I'm still admitting people into the room. Do students like feedback? Some students will come into the office and say, I really appreciate what you have said. I think it will make me a better teacher, a better scholar, a better researcher. Others just don't want to be bothered. They just want to get the grade and get the course over with and done with. We need to find out how often they want to get feedback.
Michael, I beg your pardon for interrupting, but now you are the only host of this meeting. While we were trying to allow you to share your screen, we made the only host of your meeting, and there are some people who are speaking right now. I think we need to warn them, or you can just help us to make us co-hosts of this meeting.
Okay. I have to speak to everyone to mute because we're hearing dogs and children and screaming and yelling in the background, which interferes
Okay,
with my
perfect warning.
presentation.
I think it will work. I think this works. Thank you very much.
Okay. This
Okay,
is
great.
maybe you'll give me too much feedback that I am too loud or too domineering.
Yeah, you
Okay.
see, this is the effectiveness of feedback.
This is effective feedback, and we have to move on.
And
Okay.
there is silence right now.
And that's what we want. I want to be the only voice.
Okay, good.
All right, thank you. Should we do a formative assessment? In other words, should we, at the beginning of a course, ask if students want feedback? What kind of feedback? I'm going to talk in a few minutes about the different types of feedback. And then at the end of the course, let's get a paragraph from them about did they feel that it was helpful or beneficial? We also have to look at what the literature says, because there has been some published literature, and I will be glad to send it to you. I have my PowerPoint to send also, in case I go too quickly through this, because they've only given me 20 minutes. Okay, there are 9 types of feedback according to Gadru and Liu. These things shape students' learning, thinking, and engagement. One type of feedback is appreciation. I appreciate what you have done, your work, your effort, your energy. There's another type of feedback where we say back or restate or summarize what they have said. Another type of feedback links to other resources. I'm going to provide some resources for you at the end. Another type of feedback is not exactly feedback, but questions. We want to probe, we want to get them to think a little bit more deeply into this. We then have to provide also some next steps. What is their next step as a scholar or a researcher? What should they be looking at or doing next? With some students, we have to provide a certain amount of guidance that they are looking at the wrong research. They're looking at old research from 1950 and 1960 and 1970. The research is just too old. Now we have online learning, so we have a lot of different things to deal with. Sometimes an instructor can provide some feedback in terms of sharing what we call personal experiences, that they went through a certain difficult time with their thesis or their dissertation. Sometimes the instructor is like a facilitator, connecting people who have the same interests. They both share an interest in a certain topic or area, and we have to bring those two together. In a sense, this Education Talks is bringing together a lot of people with similar educational concerns. Lastly, we want to provide encouragement, particularly during this pandemic time. People are very upset, they're fearful, they're anxious, they're tense, they're nervous, they're irritable. So we want to give them some encouragement. Okay, there's a scholar in the United States named Grant Wiggins. He says there's 7 keys to effective feedback. One is a goal reference type of thing. We want the student to learn something about maybe mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance. We want the feedback to be very tangible, very exact, specific, and precise, and transparent. We want them to be able to do something with that feedback, actionable. We want it to be user-friendly and supportive. We want it to be current and timely, and then it should be ongoing. You can't just give a lot of feedback 1 week and then nothing 2 or 3 weeks after. And the feedback has to be consistent. This is the problem that a lot of students have and a lot of faculty have, that they are not consistent over the 15 weeks. Another type of feedback, appreciation. We want to know that the student is appreciated and that their efforts are appreciated. We want to provide links to various resources so that they have some other material to follow up on. Now, types of feedback, we can have written feedback, email, we can have discussion board, we can have Audacity or Zoom. And you have to decide for yourself what is the best way for you to give feedback. Sometimes I can give written feedback, but if I have a Zoom feedback, then it gets to be a kind of argument where the student may not agree. We try to keep it non-judgmental. Now, some faculty members have very, very large classes. I have fellow faculty members and they have like 80 students. So they have to give their feedback maybe in a group setting, or they have to give a massive goal-oriented statement about the entire class. We can also have students do a self-evaluation, and sometimes students are more harsh on themselves than you are as an instructor. Sometimes they can also get feedback from peers. Peers aren't as harsh. They're more supportive, but there's no learning going on. Here's what I call the top 20 ways. And since you're going to be able to get this via PowerPoint, I'll just run through them quickly. Feedback should be educative in nature. Our job is to educate. Our job is to teach. Feedback should be given in a timely manner. This is a behavioral thing. We want to give the feedback as immediately as possible. And we have to be sensitive to the needs of the students. Now, I have both males and females in my class. And with females, I tend to be a little bit more soft and tender and demure and understanding and supportive and kind and gentle. And with males, like, for example, I see Theo there, he understands this and he can relate to this, that he's able to take more feedback than some other individuals. You have to ask yourself, what are the individual needs? Some students need to be lifted up. Some kids need to be challenged. And your job is to find out what is it that they need. I don't know Simon, he's out there, but I don't know what his particular needs are, but we want to get him involved, okay? Which is why I gave him his name and Theo's name. We want to get engagement and involvement. Does this make sense? Now, feedback should reference a skill or a specific knowledge. Some students don't have good statistical knowledge. We need to tell them about a mean, a median, a mode, and what it is, because they don't seem to understand these things. We want to give feedback that's keeping kids on target for achievement. Sometimes they're just going to need a one-to-one conference. I have one student that I just almost need to meet face-to-face. Sometimes we want to concentrate on just one ability, like writing. We don't pay enough attention to writing from kindergarten through college. Okay, Theo, you're relating to this also. You're probably a good scholar that focuses on writing. Okay, we need to educate students on how to give feedback to one another. Sometimes we can also ask another faculty member to provide feedback for inter-rater reliability. We want students to take notes, and we want them to keep track of their progress. Sometimes genuine praise really is important. You can say good, excellent, well done, but I really enjoyed that thing that you did recently or what you posted. Sometimes we have to give models or examples, and we can also invite students to give you as the instructor feedback also. I don't know how much time we have left, but if you keep me posted on this.
Okay. How many slides do you have, Michael?
About 3 or 4 more. I'll go through them.
Time is okay. We don't have any problems with time. You can just move on.
Okay, so student perceptivity of feedback. What do they think? Do they feel, or do they just ignore it in total? How many ignore it? How many take it to heart? How many see it as an important part of their growth and development? Now, what kind of feedback engages students? Some students, they need to hear it, so you have to use Audacity or some other technology to communicate verbally. They don't always read. I sometimes write long sentences, but I'm not sure that they read them. And then how do they perceive it? Do they perceive it as a personal affront or as a sincere effort to improve their learning? Okay, feedback during a pandemic. What we're dealing with now is obviously this coronavirus. I've recovered from it, fortunately, although I spent one night in the hospital. But what we try to do in terms of feedback during this critical time is we want to provide support. Everyone is concerned. Everybody is worried that people don't deal with change well. There's stress. So we want to try to nurture individuals and support them during this time. We want to encourage them. We want to check in to make sure that they are okay. We don't know whether they're sick or whether they're dealing with some other problem. So it's important to maintain what we call consistent contact. We need to be supportive and remind them that this is all going to end, maybe this summer, maybe in the fall, but it will eventually come to an end. While we're doing all this, we have to remind people as to deadlines. Yes, we're going through this, but this is the framework of the course. And then we can simply ask how they are coping. How are they doing during this pandemic? I see a lot of faces out there, and I'm hoping that you're all doing well and coping with all the adversity and all the challenges that you're dealing with. Okay, a couple of things that I have offered to students. We will get through this. We're all in this together. We're all dealing with having to wear the face masks and having to keep social distance and stuff like that. When you give feedback, this also serves as a distraction. It gets them thinking. We want them thinking. What a concept that we want our students to think. Feedback also during this time keeps students focused on learning and on target. We need to help them to understand that they're still engaged in the learning process. Feedback can be by email, Blackboard or Canvas, or Skype or Zoom. These are all methodologies that some people are familiar with. Feedback keeps students involved, and feedback keeps students learning. But we need to do a lot more research to find out what types of feedback. There's suggestive feedback, there's questioning feedback, there's a whole lot of different types of feedback. And I can share this, all these references with you. And right now I'm doing some research with students. If anyone wants to use this form, I'm going to do a Qualtrics thing with this to try to get more information about how students see feedback and how they appreciate it or not.